Namaskar. Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar on draft learning frameworks for the grades 11th and 12th. We have with us Dr. Joseph Emmanuel, Director Academics, officers from Cbse Academic Unit, Cbse experts in the subjects of English, economics, biology, physics, chemistry, Hindi, mathematics, and we have with us experts from educational initiatives, Shinisha Shukla and Maulik Shah. So we are going ahead with the program today. I invite Dr. Joseph Emmanuel to give his opening address regarding the learning frameworks and their alignment with the vision of NEP. Let me introduce Dr. Joseph Emmanuel. He is the Director Academics and responsible for guiding the schools in the areas of teaching, learning, and assessment. Dr. Emmanuel is a doctorate in financial management. Under his guidance, CBSE has brought out nearly 60 manuals and handbooks during the last 4 years. And Sir is also heading the projects of systemic reforms such as competency-based education, key stage assessment, SUFFLE, school quality assessment and assurance, and Center for Excellence in Assessment that aim to bring excellence and equity in school education. Dr. Manuel is also a member of various committees appointed by the Ministry of Education. I welcome you, sir, and hand over to you for your opening address, sir.
Good evening to all. Thank you so much, Dr. Pragya, for those nice words, though it was not at all necessary. Good evening, all the experts from the educational initiatives, all my colleagues from CBSE, all the educators who are part of this webinar today. This is a major initiative of CBSE to come out with the learning framework of classes 11 and 12 in all the major subjects of the senior secondary classes. We have started this journey of learning outcome-based education in the year 2019 with the coming of the draft National Education Policy. And after that, with the support of all the educators, all the academic officers, and the school leaders as a whole, we have traveled and we have covered a lot of areas, and we have achieved a lot during the last 4 years. To begin with, we started competency-based education by adopting the learning outcome developed by NCERT, and to take the learning outcome to this school level, we have introduced the learning, we have introduced competency-based education, and to promote learning, the assessment for learning and assessment as learning was also introduced. In continuation of that, to make the classroom transaction robust and joyful, different manuals and handbooks for bringing joyful as well as active learning in the classrooms were developed. The active pedagogy, innovative pedagogy is one of the core focus area of the board for enhancing the quality of teaching learning in the classroom. When the classroom becomes joyful and effective, learning will naturally happen in a natural environment. And to understand and to make the system understand the ability of assessment as a tool for learning, the focus has been given for competency focused assessment. Our ultimate aim is to use these tools in the board examination by the year 2025 to understand the efficacy of the whole system. Till then, capacity building is happening. We are focusing on the capacity building of teachers. And in this journey, CBSE has first come out with the learning framework document for classes 9 and 10. And now in continuation of that, the learning framework document of classes 11 and 12 are before you. In this major exercise, educational initiatives and their experts have played a very pivotal role, and they have partnered CBSE in developing this document. Internally by the teachers of CBSE, the school leaders and teachers enormously supported the board in going through the nitty-gritty of this document and giving suggestions and making this document at its final shape. Now we are ready to take this document to the whole school system as a draft document. This will be released today. It will be uploaded on the Cbse website. And experts who are from Educational Initiative, Mr. Nishchal and others, as well as the teachers, the panelists from various subject areas who are addressing you today, they will explain you the nitty-gritty and the linkage of this document, right from the content, the syllabus area, and how to use it in the classroom, as well as how to measure the learning outcome. The entire nitty-gritty will be explained to you by the experts. And we are also open for your suggestions for refining this document. This is a draft document. Once you are giving feedback to us, then based on your feedback, the experts will sit again and they will consider your suggestion to further improving the quality of these documents. So it's a collaborative journey. It's a continuous journey, and your inputs are very important for us. And I thank all the experts who have supported us in developing and refining this document, and all the teachers who are present here. So this shows that you are very, very interested in promoting learning as well as assessment in the system. You are ready to take up the challenges of the 21st century learning. And this is a very welcome step. And we are very happy that the schools are with us and the teachers are taking all these initiatives very positively. Once again, I thank each one of you to be part of this journey and supporting Cbse in these initiatives. And let us continuously strive for achieving excellence as well as to mark to bring a mark in the school education sector in the country. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Patel.
Thank you, sir. Going ahead with the program, we'll have a video now in front of you that would highlight the content flow of the framework. I request Ms. Andisha Shukla Maulik Shah to please present the video before us. Thank you.
Maulik, will you share your screen?
Malik, can you turn on the audio? Shall
The world around us is ever evolving and humans need to constantly adapt. We are moving towards a multidisciplinary world. Hence, a new set of 21st century skills are the need of the hour. The National Education Policy envisions to address this change by moving away from rote learning towards competency-based education that focuses on skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and learning with understanding. The Central Board of Secondary Education, in collaboration with educational initiatives, has created learning frameworks for grade 11 and 12 to help educators in making this shift possible. Children learn in a variety of ways, such as listening, reading, playing, interacting, and doing. This learning leads to change in their behavior. These changes, when observed and assessed, are often termed as learning outcomes. The learning outcomes outlined by the NCERT has defined what students are expected to know from a subject at different levels. We have taken one step further by mapping every learning outcome to key concepts of each chapter. All content-specific learning outcomes are further broken down into indicators defining specific knowledge or skills the student needs to attain. All students will be tested for each of these skills during assessment. The indicators will act as a connecting bridge between textbook content and the learning outcomes. This will guide teachers to align classroom learning and use it to track learning levels of students. The learning framework is a comprehensive document that details out the competencies, mapping out skills for 21st century for each chapter and assessment strategies. This will guide planning, teaching, and assessment of subjects in schools. Using these frameworks as guiding principles, educators can ensure the overall development of students, turning them into leaders of tomorrow. Cbse, in collaboration with educational initiatives, invites all educators to share their insights and feedback on the learning frameworks for grade 11 and 12.
Thank you, Maulik. Now I request Mr. Nishal Shukla, Vice President, Content Development and Pedagogical Research, to give his address on AI's methodology and purpose of creating these learning frameworks. Over to you, Mr. Nishal, please.
Thank you, Pragya ji. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nishchal and I represent EI. With me, we have my colleagues as well, and we'll be taking you through the overall learning framework, how it is designed, and the various aspects. So what I'll be doing is I'll be covering briefly about the purpose of the learning framework that we've designed and giving a brief background about how we came about developing the frameworks. And then my colleagues will take you through the overview and the flow of the learning framework document, describe each and every section, what each section does, how the section is designed, and also touch upon the ways by which we can use these learning frameworks in our context. Molly, can you please move to the next slide? So again, I think just to give a brief background about the learning frameworks, when we started consulting with Cbse and experts, and we started working on the learning frameworks, one of the things that we started with, which was to study what other international boards are doing, what are some of the global best practices around learning frameworks. And one of the things that we observed was that the purpose of the learning framework document everywhere was to make sure that we provide a comprehensive guide to help teachers plan, teach, and develop assessments in a certain way, and that too for each and every subjects. Also, the primary audience we observed was a teacher who was going to go through the document and also to some extent transmit this information to the students and parents. To a large extent, we found that the formats were different from board to board or different countries. But at the end of the day, what we observed was that this learning framework should be able to provide to be as a comprehensive syllabus guide for the teachers. Largely, we observed that the various global best practices around this and the learning frameworks that we observed covered 4 different elements. For each subject, it described the nature of the subject. Second was the overall syllabus and the outline of the syllabus. The third was detailing out the learning outcomes and the various learning indicators for each and every topic in that particular subject. And the last one was around providing teachers how to assess a particular topic or a specific learning indicator. Majority of the documents, the bulk of the document, sorry, please go to the previous, yeah. Majority, please be on the previous slide. The bulk of the document was the learning indicators and the learning outcomes. And various boards use these terminologies interchangeably. So they would use things like learning outcomes, essential ideas, syllabus, or learning indicators. And that's what we observed when we studied the international boards. Please move to the next slide. But we also observed that in these frameworks, there were 2 key challenges. One of them was that some of the frameworks were too broad in the sense that they covered the different topics and indicated a very overall level of the learning outcomes, which practically for a teacher becomes very difficult to translate if they have to translate that to a lesson plan or even design good assessments. So that was one of the challenges that we observed. And on the other hand, we found that some of the boards were relying too heavily on the textbooks. So while there were certain broad learning outcomes, at the end of the day, the teacher was expected to just stick to the textbook and deliver the different granular outcomes that were covered in the textbook. And these were 2 common challenges that we observed. And yeah, please move to the next slide. And we thought that as a solution, I think if we can come up with a learning framework which bridges the 2 things. So in our context, we have on one side the NCERT learning outcomes, which Cbse has now adopted. And on the other hand, we do have the NCERT textbooks that we follow in our schools. If you are able to marry the 2 and provide a connecting link for teachers to see how the learning outcomes and the textbook content can be clubbed together, and also determining which are the indicators for each learning outcome, if you are able to provide that sort of guide for the teachers, it can be a very good resource to then help them in planning, teaching, and the assessment on all the 3 aspects. Yeah, please move to the next. Yeah. So in essence, what is the learning framework document that we are talking about? It is a comprehensive document. It is not only about listing the NCERT learning outcomes or defining the nature of the subject, but it goes into detailing out for a given learning outcome, what are the different indicators which will tell us that the students have actually learned that particular outcome or not. It also lists the different 21st century skills that we should be focusing on and which will eventually also help us to move towards competency-based education that the national education policy talks about. And it also covers different assessment strategies, because at the end of the day, it becomes very important for us to determine whether students have achieved those learning outcomes or not, or whether they've mastered those indicators or not. And hence, it becomes very important for us to design the assessments in a very smart way. And that's where some of these assessment strategies are also detailed out in the learning framework document. The purpose is to provide, again, a guide. It's not something that we want everybody to just stick to. It should be like a guiding document which tells us how to plan our lessons or how to go about conducting certain assessments in our schools. And who is the key user who is expected to use this document? It is primarily the teachers, the educators. It could be subject matter experts or even people who create assessments around these different learning outcomes. Please move forward. Yeah. So what we are releasing today is the draft learning frameworks for these 12 subjects, and they will be made available on the Cbse website for everybody to comment and provide feedback on. These will be available on the Cbse website later today. Yeah. Please move to the next slide. Just to cover the guiding principles that we have followed while defining these learning framework documents. So the first thing that we said was, let us not make the list of learning indicators so granular that it becomes very mechanical for anybody to just list it down. So for the first principle that we followed was the list that we make should not be very, very granular, and it should not be defined in a very mechanical way. That was the first principle that we said. And another linked principle was that it has to, the framework has to highlight the essential ideas or the key concepts that each topic should cover, which will also mean that those should be the focus areas, and whether or not the entire list is covered or not, it is irrelevant. And what it will eventually mean is that if we are focusing on those key ideas and conveying those key ideas, we will slowly move away from rote memorization and trying to cover the entire list by just memorizing things instead of focusing on the key ideas and understanding those key ideas. So that was the first principle that we followed. The second was to make sure that we are not linking the learning indicators very, very strictly to the textbooks, because it's possible that the textbooks change over a period of time. But at the same time, if you take a certain topic or a subtopic, there could be certain areas which are very, very essential to understand, and there are certain things which are important to know around that particular topic. And the learning indicators have been designed keeping those in mind. So while they are aligned to the textbook, it is not following the exact page by page or word by word of the textbook. So that was the second principle that we have followed while defining the learning framework. The third is, again, like I said, call out very clearly which are the essential ideas, which are the key concepts for a given topic. And not just that, also indicate certain good assessment questions which can be used to test those specific essential ideas and learning outcomes. So the document that you see you will see these elements of essential ideas and the assessment questions to test those essential ideas. The fourth one was to demonstrate how a given concept can be tested or assessed for all the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So the different skills that we see in the Bloom's taxonomy, for a given concept, how can I design a question to a test, say, for example, knowledge or understanding or evaluation or synthesis? The document tries to provide indication around that as well. The fifth one was to include assessment items. Again, I think a lot of the times, if our end goal is clear, which is what is it that will tell me whether my students have understood or not, which is what is the assessment item I should use, or a specific task that I should use. If that is clear, then everything else follows from there, which is how do I teach so that my student is able to reach that particular outcome or not. And to provide more inputs around that, we have tried to provide assessment samples, innovative questions around case-based questions, assertion reasoning questions on the various topics throughout the document. And that was one of the principles, saying that let's provide this so that teachers are aware of the different assessment strategies as well. We also indicated a blueprint to say that if there's a summative assessment, what kind of blueprint could be used to test for a given topic. various aspects of the different skills and to cover the large spectrum of the topics that the subject covers. And the last guiding principle that we followed was, wherever possible, let's include suggestions, let's provide suggestions around real life examples or further ideas that they could take and discuss in the classroom. And this has been consciously put in the document for all the different topics and all the different subjects. So these were the various guiding principles that we use to define the learning frameworks for our different subjects. And I'll now invite my colleague Maulik, who is also a maths expert, to take us through the learning framework document, what are the different sections and what it entails. And while we will take specific one or two subjects as example, I think this is just to show what a learning framework document and how the structure is. You will find that different subjects will follow a very similar structure. So while we will use maths as an example, or say history as an example, largely it applies to all the different subjects. Maulik, maybe you can continue.
Nishal, if you want
I'll briefly talk about the process. Yes, sorry. So again, I think the process that we've used to create the learning framework documents is that first we started by doing secondary research around what are global best practices, what are international boards doing. And we had an inception meeting with the Cbse and the Cbse experts to determine what should be the scope of the learning framework document, what all should it cover. Based on that, we created the first draft of the learning framework documents for all the subjects. And that was then passed on to the Cbse subject matter experts and the different schools, who provided their valuable feedback on each and every element, each and every aspect of the learning framework document. We also did certain comparison with international boards, and incorporating the feedback from the different experts that we got, we came up with the revised draft, which is being released today. So this has been largely the process that we have followed, and it has been a very consultative process in the sense that it's not just EI who has released it. At every stage, Cbse and the Cbse experts have been an integral part of development of these documents.
Thank you, Nishal. We'll now get into what are different components of learning framework document and unpack it for use in our teaching learning processes at schools. When you will find the document having these key components, it describes nature of the subject. It has NCERT curricular expectations and learning outcomes as well. So it is a single go-to document to look into the subject content. It will have textbook details, what chapters are mapped to different curricular outcomes, and it will also uncover what are different cognitive levels are there in the particular subject, how can one assess on them, and then it gets into learning indicators for each and every chapter of class 11 and 12. Here in cognitive levels, we have detailed out assessment task or sample assessment questions for one chapter each of class 11 and 12, as well as an indication of how teachers could also do it for other chapters as well. We also illustrate sample pedagogical processes and assessment strategies, which will be very helpful while doing a lesson plan. So what all are different structures to come up with lesson planning, how one should use guided inquiry, real life examples to create motivation to learn the concept, the new topic. All those things are detailed out for one chapter each of grade 11 and 12. Again, we expect teachers to use this as a guide to pick up best things from what is there in the document and adopt it for their own lesson planning. We then also illustrate sample question paper design, which could be used for devising any formative or summative assessments. We have exemplar questions illustrated, which also talks about how to structure MCQs, how to have constructed response items, how to go about developing them, structuring your thought processes. And then it gets into listing of essential ideas for each and every chapter and questions to assess them. One MCQ and one subjective question is illustrated for each and every chapter. Let me now get into more details of how we can unpack learning framework document in our teaching learning processes at schools. Primarily, our teaching learning processes comprise of three major stages. First is planning an academic calendar. Second is particularly planning for a topic or a lesson. and then creating assessments, right? All the areas which are highlighted in bold are the aspects where learning framework document can be very useful resource to build upon. For an example, nature of subject, curricular expectation, textbook chapters, essential ideas, learning indicators will be very helpful for planning an academic calendar, how many class periods should be devoted, what should be the sequence of teaching different chapters or topics, and things like that. While planning, again, essential ideas will be very helpful. First and foremost, it will help us define the learning goal. So learning indicators will be very helpful for that, not for that particular topic, but especially in some subjects like mathematics. Even for prerequisite topics, one can use it to build upon the prior learning. Then we get into evidences of the desired learning, which means how do we know whether learners have achieved desired proficiency or not. So listing of learning indicators would have already helped us define the goal, but then how will we know the goal has been met or not? So it will guide us in creating assessment tasks or questions, responses on which will tell us whether learners have achieved desired proficiency level or not. Now the goals are clear to us, evidences of learning are tools, or rather tools or measures are in place. We need to transact the lesson in classrooms. And in doing lesson planning, again, we get into these different structures. One could start with hook or introduction to create excitement to learn the new topic. One could use real life examples or multidisciplinary approach where the subject knowledge is getting used and things like that. One then gets into guided inquiry to facilitate desired learning. Learners should ideally discover concepts, the new ideas that we want on their own. So as a facilitator, how we can nudge students to discover the learning on their own is also illustrated for one chapter each of grade 11 and 12. Activities to promote guided learning are also illustrated. Definitely exit tickets or formative assessments are important to understand if lesson plan has been successful or not. So here also learning framework document can be a useful guide. While creating assessments, we get into creating blueprint, knowing what essential ideas and indicators we want to assess on and at what cognitive levels. Document will also help us over here on unfolding that for a particular subject. And then we get into creating assessment tasks, even projects or questions. Let me get into a little more detail on each of them. For planning of academic year, nature of subject will be quite helpful. How this is relevant to 21st century will also help us understand the expectations for classes 11 and 12. Then NCERT LOs are already listed once again for each and every subject. It is then unfolded into what all content units are there and what NCERT chapters cover them. Now, one gets into lesson planning, right? While doing a lesson plan, it is important to first specify a goal very clearly. It could be as articulated, clear, in detailed as a learner is said to be proficient in a particular topic or a chapter if he or she demonstrate learning mentioned in these learning indicators. For an example, C114, C115, these are the learning indicators a particular chapter must reach. Then we also take into account what are big ideas, essential ideas. These are the core or the crux of a topic which a learner should get, and that will help him connect different aspects of the particular topic or knowledge. For an example, in case of maths, it is very important to see limits and to see continuity as well as derivative of a function as a special case of limit, so that all the properties of limits of a function are also naturally carry forward to continuity and derivative of a function as well. And it becomes easier for a learner to make those connections. It is also important to make geometrical sense of these ideas, and these becomes the crux of this particular chapter on limits and derivatives. Like that, these essential ideas or enduring areas of understanding are illustrated for each and every chapter in each and every subjects. So once the goal is clearly articulated, one gets into at what are different proficiency levels a learner could be in, right? So here is where Bloom's cognitive levels will be of very handy with us. In this particular sections, which are highlighted in green, of the learning framework, we can find those resources now. It also illustrates what means applying mathematics, let's say what means apply for mathematics, what means analyze for mathematics. For each and every subject, what all these cognitive domains means in general are illustrated first, and then we also have illustrated sample questions and tasks for each and every cognitive domains to make better sense of them. So once these goals, learning indicators are identified, one then gets into framing those questions or having those questions in place, which will tell us whether learners have reached desired proficiency levels or not. And a good assessment principle talks about having assessment which is balanced. We should cover all different cognitive levels and assess learners on. It will also help us distinguish between someone who has high math ability, let's say, and someone who has low math ability as well. So this aspects of the learning framework will be quite helpful there. And we expect teachers and we encourage teachers to populate such details for each and every chapter so that it will be very helpful to do lesson planning. Now that we have goals very clearer, the proficiency levels well defined, we need to create evidences of learning. What are those questions or assessment tasks which will tell us whether learners have reached the desired proficiency level in the LOs that we wanted? So here is how we can structure assessment items. If it is an MCQ, what is the chapter name, the content domain learning outcome, the indicator that we want to assess on, and at what cognitive level we want to assess student on. We should also articulate what is the thinking process a learner needs to demonstrate or reason out while attempting this problem or solving this question. We should also know what difficulty level the question is belonging to, in general, easy, medium, difficult, so that assessment is well balanced, and then also understand the stipulated time a learner might take, so that assessments are within the prescribed time, if at all they are time bound.
Sure.
It is important to have distractors which are plausible and strong, and articulating reasoning behind why a particular child will choose a particular option will be very helpful in arriving at meaningful distractors. Often these distractors are misconceptions or common errors a learner might demonstrate in a particular concept. Here is an example of a question on limit of a function, which assesses conceptual understanding and frame in a nice format of assertion and reasoning. So one can use those innovative question types as well. These sections in the framework document will have content to guide in creating good assessments and arriving at these good examples to be inspired by. Once we have all these goals and indicators in place, we then get into lesson planning, right? And in doing so, this is a structure a teacher could emulate, which were put up in this particular section of sample pedagogical process and assessment strategies. One lists down the indicators very clearly. Then to meet those indicators, how one should plan out our lesson, how we should facilitate classroom sessions so that learners then are demonstrating those desired understanding. So one starts with hook, ideally. We have illustrated one case over here. It is a real life example, which learner will find it very stimulating. And it will then get into questions for discussion so that guided inquiry can be followed by, and learners are nudged with those questions. They themselves construct the knowledge which we desire. So this is illustrated for one chapter each of grade 11 and 12. And then definitely for practice, we can have textbook. For exit tickets or formative assessment, again, assessment strategies are illustrated. You could also have it in your teaching learning lesson plans and use them effectively. So these are all guides you could have. You can take up good elements which work for you in your own lesson planning. When one goes into creating assessments, one can structure it in this 4 stages. First, it could start with creating a blueprint. So distribution of mark across content domains or textbook chapters. One can also have blueprint on weightage of mark as per different cognitive levels. These are higher order thinking skills. Again, one needs to have assessment items assessing them as well, and one can have weightage predefined so that we include them in our assessments. A good assessment needs to have mix of different Q types. So blueprint can also talk about distribution of mark across different Q types, question types. Once we have blueprint in place, we then shortlist essential ideas and learning indicators to assess learners on and understand what proficiency levels they are in. So these sections of framework document will help us in getting that content. Then let's say these two learning indicators are shortlisted for assessment. Then one gets into framing a question which assesses on those learning outcomes or essential ideas. For an example, one could frame a question like this. This is an example of a case-based question. It promotes multidisciplinary approach of learning as well. It could be used for stimulating the new knowledge or new topic and not necessarily assessment item as well. Here we also illustrate through this particular example that case-based questions can also be in the form of MCQ and also assess higher order thinking skills. When we encourage teachers to have more and more of such questions which assess conceptual understanding so that the knowledge is not put up in a form which is very familiar to them and they can rot learn and reproduce them in exams. Use of case-based can be very helpful in meeting that objective and assessing HOTS. And as I told earlier, it can help promote multidisciplinary approach to learning as well. It's important that learner connects ideas from various disciplines and not just remain confined within mathematics or the subject domain itself. It could also pick interest towards learning the subject and alleviate anxiety for the subject when we beautifully bring out those connections. One needs to have ample examples which connects maths or subject in day-to-day life, and some exemplar items are also there in each and every exemplar document as a learning framework documents. Here is an example of math examples. Whenever we frame subjective question, it is very important that the context, if we are using, is relatable and what is expected from a learner is very clearly articulated, and it should have a well-defined rubric so that students' responses are evaluated objectively, and we focus on developing mathematical thinking in case of maths rather than the knowledge or procedure. So a rubric could be structured like this. Here is an sample rubric, which is for the question on the previous slide. It clearly highlights the aspect of mathematical thinking, which is important rather than the solution or steps per se. So we encourage teachers also to use more of such examples in their work. Here is, let me now invite my colleague Saika, who is a social science expert, to take us through exemplar items in history and unfold the learning framework document in the context of history.
Thank you, Maulik. Good evening, everybody. So, adding to what Maulik has just explained about how to use a learning framework, what we can do as teachers while we are creating our lesson plans, use the learning framework to create your lesson plan, the teaching methodologies that you want to use in the classroom, and how to create good assessments. So a good question like the one on the screen right now, this question helps test essential ideas under the theme of kinship, caste, and class. It also checks the skills of the students, their ability to be able to write an answer, articulate a coherent answer, and once the expected response that you see students have written, you can use the expected response given in the learning framework to go back and check that yes, the students know the essential idea, I understand, but they were not able to connect it to the present day life that we live. For example, in this question, the historical knowledge of what the status of women was during the 500 BCE, how do you connect that to the present times? The question easily marries the two aspects and the two steps of lesson planning, and that is the teaching methodology and the assessment part. You can use such questions to create similar questions in the classroom, use them, and then look at the responses of the students, and that will help you that will help you modify your lesson plans going further. Secondly, apart from the besides subjective questions, you will also find multiple choice questions. These multiple choice questions, if you see that they have four options. One is the correct answer. You have three distractors, and again, such questions and creating such questions, using them in the classroom will help you find out the misconceptions students have and the logic that they use to come to the correct answer. Once you find out these misconceptions, you can update your lesson plans to be able to bring the same points and drive those points in the classroom. So use the learning framework in a way to be able to plan your lessons, create your teaching methodologies, modify them, and create assessments that check conceptual knowledge of the students. So it's a good practice to, of course, to create strong and plausible distractors that find out the logic that students are using, the reasoning that the students are using to be able to come to the answer. I will now hand it over to Pragya ma'am, so that the subject matter experts from the Cbse, they will take us through how to use the learning framework document.
Thank you, Saika, and thank you, Teams EI. Now, going ahead with the program, I invite subject experts from Cbse. So in this series, I first invite Dr. Rupa Chakravarti, Director, Sun School, Gurugram. Dr. Rupa Chakravarti is an expert in the field of English. She likes to teach English, and especially Cambridge, GCSE, A-levels and TOK for IDPP, besides life skills in adolescent students. That's her forte. And she's interested in secondary education, education technology, design thinking, differentiated instructions, curriculum development, and so many other things. Ma'am, I'm short of words to say. So I hand over the field, forum to you, ma'am, for your takeaways in the field of English related to this learning framework document, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pragya. I feel very privileged to be here on this forum. Having seen that document myself, I think it is an extremely relevant document that has been put together with everything as it should be for the teachers, which would translate into learning for students. Could I have my presentation, please, quickly, so that I adhere to time?
Sure, ma'am. So, Deji, can you please run the presentation?
So, one thing that we think of when we are talking about teaching and learning is about how the learning should begin. One thing which is very relevant is that learning happens when we are curious, and when we are not curious, rote learning happens. And that is why it is so important for us to ensure that the students are curious, because that will make sure that they learn forever, because their interest is sustained. And that also leads to ask. And ask in our school in Sun City is an acronym. It stands for application, skill, and knowledge. We also have something called task, which is TRIPS application, skill, and knowledge. So rightly said by Albert Einstein that I have no special talent. I'm only passionately curious. Based on that premise, I would like to go to the next slide, please. So I would start a class with this. We have three-pronged teaching learning approach. So I'm we have the background on which, the premise on which the teaching learning approach should be. And I'm trying to highlight how we should take it forward in class. So I would put this painting, which actually I found in the corridors and I used it. It is by a grade 6 student, if I'm not mistaken. And, so when you see this, I would, when I've put it forth to my children in class, I would ask them, what comes to your mind when you see this, and ignite their curiosity. So we call this concept initiation by igniting the curiosity. So when we are teaching the concept and their curiosity is ignited and they've given various answers, we'll go to the next one, please. We would look at a mind map and ask them, what do you think we are going to learn today? And maybe because they look at all those, at the index, they would be able to say that we are going to learn keeping quiet. So having seen that, and they would also relate to seeing that picture, what all Pablo Neruda talks about. So you will see over here, I have taken some key words from his poem, I've taken the 12 because the 12 represents the clock which is there. And I've taken the face of the earth which is there in his poetry. And also taken the language, because he says that keep quiet, don't speak a language, because the language creates a divide. So this is a beautiful thought that comes. And then he's also talked about stop, do not rush, and many other points. I've taken the key words and created this. This would again ignite their curiosity. Now, English teachers or teachers of English sometimes just tell the children the analysis of the poetry. I would not do that. I would ask them, what do these words represent to you? So the blank spots you see is what I would tell them to do. Now, all this is keeping the learning objective and learning outcome in mind. So we know the objectives. Now to reach the learning outcomes, the competencies are actually my bridge. Competencies are what is a good mix of your knowledge and your skills. So going from the objectives, which are cognitive, to the other aspect, the other domain of learning, or the various subdomains of learning is how I would put it. And I ask them to represent these with their own thoughts, because thinking and asking is very important. Next, please. And of course, we would come to the poetry thereafter. And I would either have a silent reading or ask them to interpret it, symbolically interpret it in their own words. Then we would move on to the other aspect of the learning devices, the poetic devices that are there. Here, please remember that we could put in a lot of things. We could put in the multiple intelligences. We could put in the SDGs. We could put in a lot of the learning, design thinking. So I will definitely ask them, what is war and how would we try and avoid war? We would talk about Russia and Ukraine maybe, and many other wars that's going on. We would be talking about other things that happen and understanding keeping quiet. Did Syria and Turkey like it when there was deafening quietness when the earthquake happened? So they will have another aspect to remember. Next, please. These are the poetic devices that we would look at. And next, please. And this is the serenity, the keeping quiet and the beauty of the earth, keeping in mind the SDGs. So when you look at the key words he's given us, he's also given us hopeless situation. And I think a picture like this, because a picture speaks 1,000 words, would talk about serenity, it would talk about meditation. And with that, the SDGs that have been the key to this poetry, the climate action, the peace and justice and strong institutions, and of course, partnership for the goals. And now, as you see, this we call concept elucidation. So we have concept initiation, where we ignite the curiosity. Then we have concept elucidation, which is explaining the whole concept. And then we have concept closure. So this would be the concept closure. And you can see every concept we teach. The next 2 slides, please. We do an evidence. And I'm so glad you talked about evidence. This is the evidence of the keeping quiet that was taught in the class. The next 2 slides, please. Yes. So this is how the keeping quiet of the lesson plan, and then the concept initiation. Next, please. And what they did in class. So they send it with pictures, the blueprint, and of course we have the assessment grid and the assessment through the blueprint that we actually look at. So it is absolute balance between the learning objective, learning outcomes, and the competencies that need to go into it through concept initiation, concept elucidation, and concept closure. There was a beautiful song which didn't play, which is called The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. So we would do an interdisciplinary learning with performing arts, with English, etc. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, to Dr. Joseph Emmanuel and Dr. Pragya Singh.
Thank you, Rupa ma'am. Now I invite Dr. Sudha Acharya, expert member for economics. Dr. Sudha Acharya is a gold medalist in economics in post-graduation, MPhil economics, as well as an RCI qualified special educator. She has expertise in curriculum design, technology-based education development, multidisciplinary approach towards academic and co-curricular activities. For her work in the field of special education, she has been awarded as a national awardee. Also, she is a Cbse awardee for teachers. I invite ma'am for your takeaways from the framework, ma'am. Economics.
A very good afternoon. Thank you, Pragya ma'am, for your kind words and giving me privilege to speak on this forum. Rupa ma'am, I must congratulate you. What a beautiful presentation. I am truly enamored and I was listening to you keenly. I'm so sorry I could not present any, I don't have any presentation, but I'll speak about my subject very, very passionately. As I am representing economics here, which is a very dynamic subject. It's ever evolving every day. So as an economics teacher, when children are asking me like why the share market is going up and why the capital market is behaving like that, so I can't tell them that this is not in your syllabus. So economics is a subject where it is mostly based on what is happening around us. I mean, from the time we wake up till we go to bed, we keep on making rational decisions. So we try to be a rational consumer, you try to be a rational trader, or distributor, or producer in our own capacity. So while teaching economics, as Rupa ma'am said, that curiosity is equal to ask. So in economics, mostly I adopt that simulation in the classroom. For me, my classroom is a mini India. If I have to start the concept of foreign trade, there are theories, equation, diagrams, everything. But can I simulate my class, stimulate them by an activity so that they get the feeling of trade without going into the textbook? I'll not touch textbook at all. So in my capacity, I can start trading between 2 partners sitting together, then trading between 4 students, then trading between 6, and then opening the class. And just few items in one packet, and then I'll just do that satisfaction level. You have got 5 items. Do you like all? No. So your neighbor has 5 items. Then can you exchange in between so that your satisfaction level goes up? So this is a local level of trade, then district level, then national level, and then international level of trade. So why do we engage in international trade? This is the kind of teaching learning practice where it is going much beyond textbook. And economics is a subject very well, like we are talking about integrated learning. So very well integrated with business studies, with accountancy, with maths, even with Bollywood music. I mean, one day I tried that in the class. After teaching one chapter, one concept, students said that today we are not in a mood to learn anything. Okay, let's play. So, what are the concepts you find out in songs? Identify 12 Bollywood songs where you will be identifying the economics concept of production, consumption, and opportunity cost. I could find, and I did little role reversal. Girls will find out the concept, core concept, boys will sing in the front of the class. So what happened that wo Do Bigha Jameen, Lagan, so many movies, they could identify the songs and they went much beyond that chapter. So it was a joyful classroom, and without saying that I'll be revising the concept, your exam is approaching, I did everything I could find out what is the level of understanding and how they can apply the knowledge. So with the NEP 2020, we have moved from content-based learning to concept-based learning, as we are saying. So what we do, we map the concepts. In economics, when rationalization of syllabus happened, all our teachers were very, very worried that, ma'am, this chapter, this concept has been rationalized, so children will not be asked question. So I could find that the same concept can be assimilated in another chapter. So if I talk about, suppose, say, microeconomics, it is demand, supply, consumption, production, revenue, cost, all these things, the market forms. This is going on like that. Each chapter is connected to the other. If the child has no understanding of basic concept of the first chapter, production possibility curve, who is a consumer, who is a producer, cannot apply the knowledge while we go to the equilibrium between demand and supply, disequilibrium, how to maintain balance. Like the Ukraine war, it is happening. What is the impact on Indian economy? Can they really apply the knowledge? Or intrapolation and extrapolation. During COVID, we tried out a lot of mathematical models using economics. What is the next stage of this COVID? How it will behave? So this is how we can really involve or engage the students in our subject. And Indian economic development we have in 12th, and macroeconomics. So macroeconomic concepts, when we tell them a national income accounting, how in India actually we account national income? You know, what are the methods? How value added is done? What is income method? What is expenditure method? What is value added method? We can give live examples. So as I said, simulation, if I'm teaching cost, total cost, fixed cost, average cost, can I do something in the class where children are playing a game and learning the concept? So the core concepts, as we say, we identify and map the core concept, integrate. I mean, we have moved away from chapter-wise learning to concept-wise learning. So concept mapping is very, very important for me. And next one is learning outcome. And one more concept I always say, minimum learning outcome, because our classroom is so diverse. We have got special needs children, we have got from different backgrounds, socioeconomic background, gender identity, geographical identity, so many, diversities there. So to take care of them, and I have experienced myself by identifying minimum learning outcome, that is the minimum which every child must attain. You can reduce your failure rate to almost negligible, because we are making sure that this learning outcome, the core concepts a child must master over or understand, comprehend to go to the next level. So that in economics we can do very well, because it's basically choice making, decision making, and how mathematical modules. If I go to science class, then I can explain them with the equation, with diagram, with using mathematics or calculus or something like that. If I go to humanities class, my teaching learning method will completely change. I'll give them, real life examples, evidence, documentation, so that they get the concept. If I start the class with an equation, then it will go over their head. So as a teacher, I must understand where my class and what is the dynamics of my class. Accordingly, I do that. So first thing is concept mapping, then identifying the learning outcome, and then the learning indicators. As in learning, this draft assessment we are doing, this is learning indicators we are saying. So learning indicators identified mostly by NCERT. We are also aligning as per our class dynamics, because every class is not same. So each content domain, LO or learning outcome, has been broken down into specific learning indicators, which defines the specific skill, knowledge that a student need to attain. So that's what basic thing we are discussing here. Otherwise, Bloom's taxonomy, all of us, we know that remember, understand, application, creating, analyzing, synthesis, and evaluating, all these steps we all know. So when we talk about higher order thinking, it is very subjective. As we say, some students are saying that this is not a hot question, this is not a higher order question, this is how we apply our knowledge. So some of the educators now, they are not using HOTS at all, higher order thinking question. So how the knowledge can be applied into, or how we can move from familiar to unfamiliar, from concrete to abstract, and how we can apply our knowledge in unfamiliar situation. That's the basic purpose of our classroom teaching learning. So that's why I'll ask all the economics teachers how you really design the lesson plan, and how you must understand where your children stand. What is the level of understanding right in the beginning when we enter the class? That can be a lot of misconceptions also. So what do you do? How do you break the ice and then move on? So, and then when the child is you are completing a lesson, whether the child is able to apply that or not. When I said that, if what is the impact of Ukraine war on Indian economy, or how it is affecting global economy, so that's the application part. Or how this pandemic has been a great disruptor of all kind of economic activities. So they can develop beautiful project models and showcase their talent. So curiosity is the basis of teaching learning strategy. Unless we are passionately curious as teachers also, unless we display learning in the classroom, we cannot expect our students to display curiosity and learning. So we are co-creator, co-learner, co-designer. So that's how I see teacher-student relationship. So that way, as we say, like a chapter, if I take in statistics, the statistical tools that we do in class 12, why are we doing statistical tools? But when we do economic models, how these tools have been really used. But unfortunately, now the syllabus is such that statistics is something different, macro is something different, they're all watertight, micro is something different, they're not used with each other, they're not integrated. So I would request that these statistical tools which the children are studying, how these tools are used in economic model should be incorporated. Then only truly it is integrated. Otherwise, children are doing statistics separately, macro separately, micro separately, and Indian economic development separately. These four components of economics should be integrated very well. Then when we assess children, we can assimilate all these four concepts, all these content domains, and then assess them in an innovative way. I mean, maybe like we are talking about case-based studies, we can give them some data, let them analyze, infer, and then they can synthesize, they can create, they can evaluate, they can opine, they can justify. So up to that level we can go. And economics as a dynamic subject, this is very, very required. Rote memorization has no place in economics. If you try to remember concepts, then you can never write an answer in economics, because it is always application part, what is happening around us. So that is the nature of our subject. So this draft document has been very well organized. I have just skimmed through and then not gone through in detail, but it will definitely help our teachers to develop their lesson plan, to transact in the class in the optimal way, and then in designing assessment. Thank you, Pragya ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Acharya. Now I invite Dr. Manju Balasubramaniam, Principal DPS Bangalore North. She is an expert in biology, and ma'am is a passionate reader as well as a traveler, which has enriched her knowledge as well as understanding. And ma'am is also National Awardee for Teachers as well as Fulbright Distinguished Award for Teachers. Ma'am has been associated for the review of this biology learning framework. So ma'am, please share your takeaways from this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pragya. Thank you, Cbse, for giving me this opportunity once again to be a part of a learning program that spanned over 8 months, starting in February 2022. And we were a cohort of about 14 teachers from across the length and the breadth of the country. And probably today I'm the lucky person here to, speak with the voices of all those who worked with me in this amazing program. It was a true amalgamation of comparing of global best practices and understanding the education system, specifically biology in the Indian context, and saying what is it that is relevant to our students? How is it student centric? How do we make the teacher, how do we empower the teacher to bring in global best practices and get CBSE to be a forerunner in new initiatives that are in tune with the NEP 2020 and the SDG 4 goals that are both to be met by 2030. Pragya ma'am, if I can have my presentation, please.
Sudhirji, can you please run the presentation?
So I started with a comparison of the NEP and the learning framework. These two documents have a number of things in common. If we could go on to the next slide. And I would like to compliment EI for supporting CBSE in this project because it was so detailed. While we have a lot of understanding in our programs of B.Ed and M.Ed about Bloom's taxonomy and about learning objectives and learning outcomes, it is not very often that we really put that into practice and understand these terms as they go about. We found that the learning framework was very student-centric. It looked at knowledge, skills, competencies, and dispositions. It was an approach of not taking a high-stake exam and teaching to the test, but in the process of learning to learn, and which is the essence of the NEP 2020. It tries to move away from rote learning to conceptual understanding. So while there is space for remembering and understanding, the objective is to move to the higher levels of the cognitive domains of Bloom's taxonomy. It really provides opportunities and ideas for learning to be experiential and joyful, even in grade 11 and 12. You assume that as you come to 11 and 12, learning has to be very abstract and very textual. The framework provides many opportunities and examples for making learning very experiential in biology. The subject is such, and it's a very good exercise at that. A lot of importance has gone into creative and critical thinking. And what really impressed us as a team was the bringing in of ethics, human and constitutional values to our learning objectives in biology. And here I would like to give examples of topics in biology that are so surrounded by ethical dilemmas. So if you look at human reproduction, we have a chapter on human reproduction. And one of the subtopics there is amniocentesis, which is the detection of chromosomes. And while that has a plus point of determining chromosomal abnormalities that the fetus might have, we come up with the question, who decides whether to have the child or not? Question one. Question two, if it's chromosomal aberrations, then there is also the determination of sex. Why does India not allow for sex determination? And we go back into sociology and talk about female feticide and female infanticide, and what context does that have to India? And we come then to the Prime Minister's initiative of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Not limiting ourselves to biology, but taking the children across the gamut of experiences that are actually happening in India. We talk about gene editing and the moratorium that has come up on the CRISPR-Cas, and saying what is the future. And COVID was a fine example of biowarfare or gene editing. And so we go back to those contexts that students can connect with. The next slide, please. Focus on learning outcome-based assessments and competency-based education. The higher levels, that is apply, analyze, evaluate, and synthesize. Synergy, you study biology from grade 1 to 12, and are you seeing this progression? Is the child seeing this progression? Is the teacher able to connect between the years? Multidisciplinary, and I just gave an example of that. Biology and physics, biology and chemistry, and we will give you some examples as I go by of when we do enzymes, which is a topic in biomolecules in grade 11, and it is again taught in grade 12 in chemistry. How do you connect? How do you bring an interdisciplinary approach? How can you teach a subject over 2 years together so that children learn seamlessly? Outstanding research as a core requisite. And I thought this point of the NEP was what this learning framework gave all of us. It gave us an opportunity to research and to get a research mindset. So only if teachers have a research mindset, they will bring that into their classrooms. And a research mindset means all children can research. They can research alone, they can research in groups. And so it's a great idea at collaborative work. Continuous review of progress based on sustained research and regular assessment by educational experts, people like us as teachers, and organizations like EI that work with education over a period of time, bringing best practices, revisiting curriculum, seeing what the world needs, what the future needs, and so working on that. So this was a great opportunity. Making India having a common benchmark for teaching, learning, and assessment, which is again one of the aspects of the NEP. This document is going to enable teachers, no matter where they are in India, in a city like Bangalore or Delhi, or in rural Shimoga or any other part of any other state. It is such a comprehensive, easy to use, user-friendly document that everybody will be able to use it. Above all, this document puts the teacher at the heart of the learning process. It gets the teacher to be an excited learner and a lifelong learner. And I think with the working of collaborative projects and us meeting like this, the concept of school complexes, autonomy with pedagogy, the way pedagogical processes can be brought into classrooms, a lot of it would be clearer to teachers across the country. Next, please. Like the team from EI explained, this was an effort on our side first to understand global best practices. And then we went back, although each one of us has been teaching biology at 11th and 12th for almost 20 years, we went back and looked at the Cbse curriculum. And we went back and looked at the NCERT learning outcomes, right? And the indicators were right at the center. And we said, let's look at both of them. And then we said, how do we reach these indicators? So we brought in pedagogical processes, classroom practices, what would we do in the classroom, and then how would we assess what the child had learned. And therefore, this entire structure was to bring in the spirit of inquiry and scientific temper. Again, one of the key facets of the NEP 2020, and science is all about bringing in that scientific inquiry and temperament. Next slide, please. So again, words can sometimes get overwhelming, and that's why I put this across even though people have spoken about it before. So we looked at concepts in chapters in the textbook, and then we mapped it to the key concept in the Cbse curriculum and to the NCERT learning objectives and the context specific learning objectives, and then from CLOs to the indicators, and from there to specific skills that children would have to develop. And I'm going to give you an example on that for it to be comfortable. So we have this chapter. The unit is unit 7, and the chapter is genetics and evolution is the unit. And the chapter is called Molecular Basis of Inheritance. The key concept here is the DNA. And one of the learning objectives there is LO6, NCERT LO6, and it's there, you can see it. It says, makes linkages at the interface of biology and other disciplines by relating various interdisciplinary concepts. And then it has a context-specific learning objective, which is describes the salient features of DNA double helical structure. Very, very specific. And from there, the indicator, or what do we expect the child to know, explains the structure of the DNA and summarizes the observations that leads to the discovery of the DNA as a double helical structure. So starting from the unit to what would the child do at the end. So the child would be able to explain to you what is this double helical structure and how does it go. So that's the entire spectrum for you as an example. So when you read through the document, please lay emphasis on this unit, chapter, NCERT LO, your CLO, then the pedagogical process, and the indicator. The next slide, please. So I just put some numbers for you here. It shows the number of learning outcomes that are there in grade 11 and grade 12. It shows you the number of CLOs. It shows you the number of indicators that is marked the C. Don't get overwhelmed by the numbers. It's all done so beautifully. You can just use it as a guide to make your lesson plans so effective. And I would like to thank Dr. Shweta Singh for giving us this opportunity to work on it and for being constantly supporting us. Again, Bloom's taxonomy, NEP, SDGs, global approaches, everything you will see from here. Curricular expectations or learning objectives. In biology, we have 13 of them, and it's shown there. And not only did it do this, it also gave us an opportunity to give samples of pedagogical processes. What is it that you can do in the classroom and how you could assess those. So the team from EI said, Mr. Shah said, there is an example from grade 11 and there's an example from grade 12. Next slide, please. It also gives information about the test paper design and summative assessments. Well, there is a lot of formative assessments in the pedagogical processes. It gives you an overview on the kind of summative assessments that can be planned, the kind of question papers, the questions in the question paper. We paid keen attention to case-based questions and assertion reasoning questions because they are newer on the block and teachers and other teachers would require more support. So we paid attention to that. You still have multiple choice questions and distractors that were discussed before. And remembering and understanding is about 50% is what we worked at. It also takes into account the practical aspect of it, and 5 learning objectives are met with in the practicals in biology. Again, questions are given there. And there are, like Mr. Shah said, there are essential ideas, that is core concepts. Instead of studying a subject in the breadth of it, identifying essential ideas and going in depth so that your understanding of those concepts is very strong. So there are examples of those essential ideas and how they can be worked with. In entirety, we found this experience to be a huge learning experience. It will take, while we worked on it for 8 months, teachers who are going to use it will have to go through it a couple of times. But because it's on the Cbse portal, it is for all stakeholders. It is for learners, it is for teachers, it is for researchers, it's for parents who are engaged in supporting the children. But it is an extremely user-friendly document. And once again, I'd like to congratulate my team who worked with me and EI and Cbse for bringing such world-class research to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manju Arif. Now, our next speaker is Ms. Nidhi Kalucha. She is an expert in physics and teaches this subject at Sanskriti School. She is a resource person for designing infographics on learning outcomes at NCERT for higher secondary stage, and she has been associated various national educational bodies. And she has been teaching this subject physics for more than two decades now. Ms. Nidhi, for your comments.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, good evening to everybody present, my esteemed colleagues. And thank you, Cbse, for providing me an opportunity to attend this webinar and participate in it. So I would like to give my inputs on physics, the physics framework. Now, when I looked at the physics framework, it's a very comprehensive, excellent document, but it does require a high level of commitment from the teachers, from the students, for it to be implemented well. So it's a wonderful document. The implementation has been broken down to very small, nice steps and explained very well. So the first thing that the document talks about is the nature of physics. So physics is considered as the most basics of science, and it it's visible everywhere in our daily lives, in the air that we breathe in, the food that we make, and everything. So physics is there in every little bit of our life, and it's there in all the technological applications that we see around us. So there is no question about why should we study physics. But that is what the lesson plan, the next thing it talks about is the lesson plan, which is the foundation of the structure on which our class starts. So in the lesson plan, the framework has given very clear guidelines that first you need to tell the child why you're going to learn a particular topic. So you need to bring the excitement, as I think Mr. Malik Shah and I think Ms. Chakrabarti has already spoken about, that the first thing is you need to first excite the child, bring in daily life examples about why the child needs to study that particular topic in physics, because it's a little abstract. So when I need to teach electric field, I do need to say that water is a dipole. So you need a lot of things you need to integrate into your lesson plan to make it exciting to begin with, and then you take it from simple, as already my colleagues have said, from simple to a little difficult, and then you bring in various assessment tools at the end. So in the lesson plan is you need excitement, then you have content development, and then after that you have an activity or something experiential, hands-on, if you can incorporate, and then after that you have to have recapitulation, whether the child, a little bit of assessment, and then maybe a summative, formative assessment or a quiz designed at the end. And the framework has given very clear guidelines about how each of these lesson plans cover and help in developing various cognitive skills, whether it is you begin with a remembering, a definition, then you go to a derivation, then you go to a numerical, a conceptual, a graph-based interpretation, analysis, a creative, and then probably you design a project, or you design an experiment, or you try to explain some phenomena which is happening around you. So relevant to physics, it has been excellent. It is very clear in all its support provided to the teacher, provided to even a student who wants to go through it. But there is, again, as I said, there's quite a bit of effort that will be required to implement it in its true form. Then it talks about, after the cognitive domains, that it will help in skill development for example, the cognitive domain, maybe remember, analyze, etc. And it's giving questions, it's giving assessment tools at the end to test those skills. And then it also talks about very specific topic-wise indicators. For example, if it's motion in a straight line, then if that's the key concept that you want to talk, the chapter being motion in a straight line, you want to talk about instantaneous velocity and the difference between instantaneous speed and instantaneous velocity, then you can go on to a graph. You can define the concept first, then go on to a graph. And then when you want to assess it, you give a graph-based question. You can give a numerical, you can give a definition, you can give a conceptual where something doubles up and then something halves. So it is, and towards the end of the physics framework, it has given a huge number of MCQs and subjective questions, which gives you the entire spectrum of higher order thinking skills that can be brought about into the lesson plan or the assessment as an assessment tool, etc. So the physics document is quite very rich and it's versatile, and it will really help teachers and maybe students and all the stakeholders. But when you talk about physics, the main thing is when you a child encounters time management issues, there's a lot of the breadth and the depth of the syllabus that needs to be covered has to be balanced with the construction of the concept in the class and the assessment. So there is a little problem there with the huge volume of the syllabus, which I always do complain about, because that eats away into the entire constructivist approach that the Bloom's taxonomy tries to take to really wants to bring about to implement good physics teaching in the class. So, as the Ukraine war, as my esteemed colleagues talked about, the Ukraine-Russia crisis can be used to talk about nuclear detonation, bombs detonation. Maybe I got a student to get a guitar into the class just to indicate that a stationary wave, if you press it down in the middle and then you pluck it, then it is the second mode of vibration. If you just leave it and then you pluck it from the center, it's the first mode of vibration. And then you have different thickness of guitar strings. So you can integrate physics with each and every medical diagnostic tool is based on physics. So biotech, physics, you have environmental implications of the nuclear winter. So physics is there everywhere. So you just, as ma'am has already said, you need to get the passion. As missing out ma'am's name, she already said that it's the passion that you need to get into the class. So the framework has got all of these elements, and it's helping the teachers build a wonderful lesson plan. So now the only thing is to manage the time and have a very nice lesson plan. So I thank Cbse for making a wonderful document, and it's definitely going to help us. We always need to test whether our question papers are completely balanced regarding the various cognitive domains, which they have put as the test items and in the question paper design at the end, so that we have just a really balanced paper. And then the framework also talks about the practicals and the projects and the activities at the end. So I would like a little more variety in the kind of experiments and the activities, the suggested activities and the experiments that the Cbse has designed. So that's just something that, it's just the same things that we've been doing, and maybe a few more things. Maybe now that technological advances have been made, so maybe some new apparatus, maybe. But the rest, it's a wonderful document, and I'm very glad. Thank you so much to be a part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nidhi. Now I invite Ms. Preeti Chadha she's a PGT in chemistry at KR Mangalam World School, New Delhi. Ms. Preeti has been associated with Cbse as an expert in chemistry and is a part of the team which has worked on the review of draft learning framework for chemistry. Ms. Chadha, what are your takeaways from the draft learning framework? Please share with us.
Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank Cbse and Pragya ma'am for giving me this opportunity to present my views on the learning framework which has just come out. Now, as all of us are talking about the introduction of NEP, definitely the learning framework which is being released today, it gives an insight how we can implement NEP in true sense. The NEP is definitely going to take the education system of our country towards a new era. It aims at the development of skill-based, integrated, and experiential learning as we all are going through. So the learning framework for the chemistry has truly touched all the topics, which when I was going through it, I was able to understand how we can integrate the different subject with the chemistry teaching, how we can plan our things, and how we can relate the daily life examples in our textbook, in our daily lessons which we are giving. Now, at the senior secondary level, when we are talking about chemistry in specific is introduced to class 11th and 12th grade student. Up to class 10th, we are talking about chemistry as the integrated science subject. When it comes as a proper subject or a main subject, so it is basically chosen by learners who want to pursue their careers in medicine, engineering, technology, studying courses in the implied areas of other science and technology and chemistry fields. Now, at this stage, we need to provide learners with sufficient conceptual background of chemistry, which will make them further competent to meet the challenges of academic and professional courses after higher secondary studies. Because our aim is not to limit them to class 12th only, but this is just a beginning where they can contribute towards the society, whether it is a medicine field or engineering or industrial process. So unless and until a learner is very much well adhered with the topic, the concept of chemistry, they are not able to give their best at the higher levels. Here, what the role of this learning outcome comes. The learning framework, they have touched the experiential part also, what I feel. Science is all about learning by doing. So the sample tasks they have provided in their document, they are actually touching what topics we are reading, we are studying, and we are seeing the daily life. Now, when we talk about pedagogical process in chemistry, it should engage our learners with various scientific processes. Now, naming a few: observations, questioning, planning, investigation, hypothesis, collecting, analyzing, interpreting. Now, when I'm talking about interpreting data, so this document has given us a lot of examples where I am able to integrate mathematics with chemistry, talking about chemical kinetics, surface chemistry. A lot of data interpretation is coming, which is not only there in math, but also if I have to relate with some statistical data, I can relate it with the economics. I'm seeing when I'm going through the document, I can see that a lot of social problems they have also addressed. Like right now, one of the basic need of our is our making our environment protection of the environmental concern. So in the framework they have touched upon those parts also, talking about environmental concerns. They have talked about the social concern like superstitions. Chemistry is a science, or it's that branch of science which deals with the as a if it is taken in a very positive manner or in a very brief manner, then it can act as myth busters also. There are a lot of superstitions and lot of people, they are using chemistry as a part of superstition. We have seen in one of the movies also where people, where the those magicians, they are attracting the crowd and they are giving some small, the tricks where they are presenting that to play with their faith. So while going through document, I got to see that they have touched upon those social problem also, where the scientific, they're talking about the development of a scientific temper of child, which is a great thing about this learning outcome, because not only is meant for the teachers who are going to plan their lesson, but also for the student who is going to gain a good amount of knowledge, how they can incorporate self study, how they can actually grasp the subject if they are sitting and just reading a textbook. Now, as we know that CBSE of lately, they are providing us more space for to introduce the competency based questions, value based question, case based question. So a lot of examples are there, or sample tasks which is there and which is provided by the makers of this framework, where the understanding of the situation is there. They are where the child is able to analyze the problem, and even the teacher is helping child to analyze what kind of problem is it. They are able to remember the concept and apply ultimately. For example, if I have to talk about a given example, in chemistry we are talking about, in chemistry again we are integrating it with the study of the flow of solvent that is there in osmosis. So if I'm talking about, there is a sample task given in the document, that if I'm having a dry raisins, or a handful of dry raisins, if I'm putting in the water, what is happening? So it is nothing. It's a daily process, daily techniques which we carry out in our kitchens. But they are relating this simple example with the endo and the exo osmosis, which is going to gain or grab the attention of the student. This is the this thing which I liked most about this document. This document is also providing the opportunity to our teachers to plan their lesson in such a manner so that they can create excitement in the class. If they are talking about the photoelectric cells which are being used, so they can create the excitement. Okay, now tell us which all metals I can use. So different students can come up with different ideas. Now they can explain with the help of the data available, that how and why this particular metal is there in photoelectric cells and all. So that way the students are also feeling that yes, they are also contributing towards the science, they are also contributing towards the inventions or the discoveries which are coming. Now, the important part of our education system is to deliver the knowledge. So, in such a manner, the students are able to assess themselves. So, this framework also gives an idea how to assess our learners. So, it is again a very beautifully documented that how teachers can assess the children. The assessment tools are based on the Bloom's taxonomy. How we can prepare a blueprint which can give us good insight, whatever we want to achieve, we want to deliver in the class, whether the child has grasped that properly or not. The rubrics have been designed to each and every question, and it is definitely going to help our teachers how we can create, rather making a question. I would like to just say that creating a question, creating a situation, so that students are able to understand what they have learned and how they are going to apply. Again, it's a skill development. Now, it also guides the teachers to identify various indicators of learning and assessment strategies. The blueprint has been provided, which again helps it's going to help our teachers in designing the question papers and make our learners ready for the year-end examinations. Now, the sample questions, which I can relate that they are framed in such a manner that they are promoting the application or skill-based learning, rather than and they're keeping that they're pulling our learners away from the rote learning. Suppose they've given the examples of the chapter. There's one chapter in class 12th grade chemistry, colligative properties. So they are using kitchen chemistry to make them understand why and how we can use this concept in our daily life. Making cup of tea can also be a place where we are teaching our students how we are applying the concept in our daily life. So, which I feel that they have incorporated or integrated the NEP in such a beautiful manner. Now, with this, I would like to say the learning framework of chemistry is a complete guide to our chemistry teachers and definitely going to facilitate the teaching learning process with a view, with a commitment to nurture this scientific temper in our young learners. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, again.
थैंक यू प्रीति जी. हमारी अगली वक्ता है डॉक्टर शिक्षा कौशिक. डॉक्टर शिक्षा क्वींस मेरी स्कूल मॉडल टाउन दिल्ली में हिंदी की वरिष्ठ अध्यापिका एवं विभागाध्यक्ष हैं. बहुमुखी प्रतिभा की धनी डॉक्टर शिक्षा को काफी पुरस्कारों से सम्मानित किया जा चुका है. मानक अधिगम की रूपरेखा के निर्माण की प्रक्रिया में इनकी भूमिका समीक्षक के रूप में रही है. डॉक्टर शिक्षा, आपसे अनुरोध है कि इसके लर्निंग फ्रेमवर्क के बारे में अपने विचार प्रस्तुत करें और कैसे हमारे शिक्षक इसको अपने दैनिक क्लास में इसको उपयोग कर सकते हैं.
जी, धन्यवाद मैम. सीबीएसई और एजुकेशनल इनिशिएटिव्स का हार्दिक धन्यवाद, जिनके इस कार्य को करने का मुझे आज मौका दिया गया. एजुकेशनल इनिशिएटिव्स और सीबीएसई के संयुक्त तत्वाधान में तैयार मानक अधिगम की रूपरेखा के इस ड्राफ्ट के विषय में बात करने जा रही हूँ. नई शिक्षा नीति के दिशा निर्देशों को दर्शाता यह दस्तावेज कई वर्षों के निष्ठापूर्वक परिश्रम का परिणाम है. क्योंकि मैं आरंभ से ही इसकी सदस्य रही हूँ, तो इसकी प्रत्येक प्रक्रिया से भली भांति परिचित हूँ और यह कार्य हम सभी अध्यापकों के लिए इतना उपयोगी सिद्ध होगा क्योंकि यह हमारी शिक्षण अधिगम प्रक्रिया को अधिक प्रभावी और सुदृढ़ रूप प्रदान करेगा. और इस कार्य के लिए आवश्यकता है कि इस मानक अधिगम की रूपरेखा को हम अभी से पढ़कर शैक्षणिक वर्ष 2023-24 के लिए एक योजना तैयार करें. नई शिक्षा नीति शैक्षणिक नवाचार और सीखने सिखाने के नए तरीकों को प्रोत्साहित करती है. विद्यार्थियों में अनुभवात्मक अधिगम और कला समेकन की बात करती है और नई शिक्षा नीति की विचारधाराओं को सभी सरलता एवं सुगमता के साथ अपना सकें, यह प्रयास इस लर्निंग फ्रेमवर्क द्वारा स्पष्ट रूप से परिलक्षित होगा. यह फ्रेमवर्क पाठ्यपुस्तक के अध्यायों के आधार पर संकेतकों को सम्मिलित करता है और प्रत्येक विषय के लिए निर्धारित भारांक को समझने के साथ ही इस दस्तावेज में दिए गए महत्वपूर्ण विचारों का अध्ययन करना हमारा कार्य रहेगा। दस्तावेज में दिए गए विचार इस योजना को बनाने के लिए अत्यधिक उपयोगी सिद्ध होंगे और यह विचार धारा संशोधित ब्लूम टैक्सोनॉमी की 6 श्रेणियों को स्पष्ट करती है। साथ ही उसके आधार पर करवाए जा सकने वाले विभिन्न कार्यों, गतिविधियों और पूछे जा सकने वाले प्रश्नों को क्रमबद्धता के साथ दर्शाती है। यहाँ हायर ऑर्डर थिंकिंग स्किल अर्थात उच्च स्तरीय चिंतन कौशल को विशेष रूप से दर्शाया गया है कि किस आधार पर हम प्रश्न बना सकते हैं, उद्देश्य किस प्रकार निर्धारित किए जाएं इत्यादि। तो सीबीएसई और एनसीईआरटी द्वारा सीखने के प्रतिफल लर्निंग आउटकम्स तैयार किए गए हैं और हम सभी इनसे परिचित हैं और पिछले कुछ वर्षों से इनका प्रयोग अपने शिक्षण अधिगम प्रक्रिया में करते रहे हैं। एजुकेशनल इनिशिएटिव्स द्वारा इन्हें और अधिक बारीकी के साथ स्पष्ट करते हुए दक्षता आधारित अधिगम को बढ़ावा देने के लिए अर्थात कॉम्पिटेंसी बेस्ड एजुकेशन को बढ़ावा देने के लिए इन्हें विभिन्न श्रेणियों में वर्गीकृत किया गया। प्रत्येक पाठ से संबंधित सीखने के प्रतिफल और उस प्रतिफल अर्थात एलओ से प्राप्त होने वाली दक्षताओं को भाषा कौशलों के आधार पर सम्मिलित किया गया और यह अपने आप में नए अध्यापकों एवं अनुभवी अध्यापक वर्ग के कार्यों को सुगम करने के साथ साथ उनकी सोच को और अधिक विस्तार देने का कार्य भी करेगा। यह न केवल नए उत्साह को जगाएगा अपितु सीखने को सुगम बनाने के लिए निर्देशित अनुसंधान कार्यों को भी बढ़ावा देगा। उदाहरण स्वरूप हिंदी कोर के दिए गए इस दस्तावेज में नमक का दारोगा के कुछ बिंदु आपके साथ साझा कर रही हूँ। नमक का दारोगा पाठ के लिए पठन की अवधारणा के आधार पर एनसीईआरटी के एलओ की बात करें तो यह निर्दिष्ट होता है कि पाठ्य पुस्तकों में सम्मिलित रचनाओं के साथ ही पाठ्य कविता सामग्री से इतर रचनाओं, कहानी, एकांकी और समाचार पत्र इत्यादि पढ़ते हैं और लिखकर बोलकर अपनी राय व्यक्त करते हैं। इसे ध्यान से देखें तो यह सीखने का परिणाम स्वयं में बहुत अधिक फैलाव लिए हुए है और इस दस्तावेज में इसे विशिष्ट सीखने के प्रतिफल में बांटा गया और तत्पश्चात दक्षताओं के आधार पर इसी एलओ के आधार पर अनेक दक्षताएं उभरती हैं जिन्हें यहाँ सम्मिलित किया गया है। पहली दक्षता की बात करूं तो यहाँ कहा गया कि कहानी पढ़कर समझते हुए उससे जुड़े सामाजिक मुद्दों के बारे में बता पाएंगे, जो कि पाठ नमक का दारोगा में स्पष्ट रूप से दिखाई देता है। दूसरी दक्षता की बात करूं तो कहा गया कहानी में आए पात्रों के मनोभावों पर अपने विचार साक्ष्य के साथ साझा कर पाएंगे। तो इस प्रकार अन्य दक्षताएं भी इसी सीखने के परिणाम को अधिक स्पष्ट करती हैं, जिससे न केवल उद्देश्यों की सहज पूर्ति होगी बल्कि मूल्यांकन व आकलन में भी सहायता मिलेगी। यह छात्रों की अलग अलग क्षमताओं और सीख को मूल्यांकन का आधार प्रदान करता है। लर्निंग फ्रेमवर्क से सीखने के संकेतकों इंडिकेटर्स की पहचान के बाद इसी आधार पर प्रश्न बनाने की आवश्यकता और किस प्रकार प्रश्न बनाए जाएं इसे विस्तार से बताया गया है और प्रश्न बैंक भी दिया गया है। बहुविकल्पीय प्रश्न जो कि आज के समय में बहुत उपयोगी और वैध माने जा रहे हैं, विश्वसनीयता के प्रतीक हैं, तो बहुविकल्पीय प्रश्न जो कि प्रश्न पत्र को और अधिक वैधता और विश्वसनीयता प्रदान करते हैं, उन्हें बनाने के तरीके, उनके लिए दिशा निर्देश यहाँ स्पष्ट रूप से दिए गए हैं। उदाहरण स्वरूप बहुत से बहुविकल्पीय प्रश्न सम्मिलित किए गए हैं। अभिकथन तर्क, कथन कारण अर्थात असर्शन रीजनिंग के प्रश्न भी इसमें जोड़े गए हैं और साथ ही तर्क दिए गए हैं कि किस कारण से ये इंडिकेटर स्पष्ट करता है या ये डिस्ट्रैक्टर क्यों इस प्रकार से दिया गया है। तो यह कहना अतिशयोक्ति नहीं होगी कि यह दस्तावेज गागर में सागर के समान हम सभी हिंदी अध्यापकों के लिए अत्यधिक लाभदायक सिद्ध होगा। मंजिलें मिलती रहेंगी कदम यदि बढ़ते रहें, बुलंद हौसले के साथ हम सभी जुड़ते रहें, नए आयाम छू जाएंगे गर चिंतन हम करते रहें। प्रज्ञा मैम, हिलाल सर, श्वेता मैम और ईआई की टीम व सीबीएसई का हार्दिक धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद डॉक्टर शिक्षा। हमारे अगले स्पीकर हैं मिस्टर राहुल सोफत। मिस्टर राहुल सोफत is a lecturer in mathematics at Air Force Golden Jubilee Institute, New Delhi. He has been associated with various national education bodies like CBSE, NCERT, and NTA for teacher training, material development, and research. Uh, Mr. Rahul Sofat is also a subject expert for the review of learning outcomes at NCERT for higher secondary level. He is a CBSE National Teachers Awardee. Mr. Rahul Sofat, I would like to ask how this learning framework can be used by teachers in their classroom transaction.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Pragya ma'am and CBSE for giving me this opportunity. One advantage, ma'am, I'm having is that most of the eminent speakers have so beautifully already highlighted the framework. So in context of mathematics, I will be explaining. Carl Friedrich once said that mathematics is the queen of sciences. And the real beauty of mathematics lies in its progression, right from the primary level to secondary and higher secondary, how mathematics progresses. So now in today's time, mathematics is not just repeatedly solving the problems, but it is like taking informed decisions, which will help our students in their practical life. So the aim is to inculcate critical thinking, power of reasoning, as well as abstract and special thinking in our students. But the main thing which I feel is, while I've been teaching for the last 20 years, the main important fact is that that joyful learning is there, even if it is for higher secondary classes. Students should not feel that it is an abstract subject. So the purpose is how to teach the subject. So the teachers alone can solve this problem, that they can make the subject joyful and the student should look forward to it. Most of the students we have seen find it difficult after some stage. So that I feel is very important, and the framework will help us to achieve our goals. Yeah. So here in this slide, the framework highlights the benefit of competency-based education. See, content is just a medium. The aim is to achieve the competency. So here in the framework, you will find chapter-wise competencies and the learning outcomes are mentioned. And the next part, which is very important part of our assessment, is the domain, the assessment. So a clear-cut rubric should be defined. Please, the previous slide. Yeah, the last point here is the assessment strategies. So assessment, I feel, is very, very important. So it should not be just memory based. The transition should be towards the competency based items, and clear instruction should be given when you are framing an item or an examination paper. There should be no ambiguity. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, as this has been clearly defined, NCERT has given us very good learning outcomes. And now this framework, it provides a mapping from learning outcomes to the indicators. So basically, maths is an abstract subject. The focus is to attain the learning outcomes through the competencies, so that our students are ready for the outer world when they pass their, because this is an exiting class, 12th class. So we have to teach them keeping these learning outcomes in mind. Next slide. Now here we have got the content units and the textbook chapters which are mentioned here. Besides this, we have, framework maps the learning outcomes with the learning indicators. Learning outcomes are broad in nature and learning indicators are very granular. And we also have defined content domain specific learning outcomes. So a clear explanation of the learning outcomes, content domain specific learning outcomes, and the indicators which are more granular, you will find in the framework. And this framework will be very helpful to the teachers while planning and deciding how to go about a chapter. Yeah, here what I was discussing was that initially the name of the chapters are there, then the key concepts which are there is mentioned, NCERT learning outcomes are there. Then after this, you will find each learning outcome is mapped to content domain specific learning outcomes. Like in this chapter of sets and function, you have 3 or 4 CLOs, and then the indicators are there. Each CLO is further mapped to the indicators. So once you go through this, the teachers will have the clear idea of what exactly they have to teach and how it is to be taken up. Next. So yeah, this is the document. The framework consists of lot many very good questions to assess the conceptual learning of the students. Like basically in this question, if you see, this is a question of limit, and very beautifully a student has to first see, until unless the student is clear with the concept, the student will not be able to answer this. Questions should not be taken as it is from the textbooks. So what you have to do is you have to give different questions which assesses whether the student has understood the concept or not, or is between the rote learners and the students who have understood, they have clarity of the concept. In this particular example, as it's already been discussed earlier, the point I want to mention is at x equal to -2, the function is not defined. And most of the students, when you ask about the limit, they will say that the limit does not exist. But in fact, the limit exists, because we are to just see the neighborhood of that point at x equal to -2, what is happening. So this is a question of reason assertion type. So I think good case-based questions and assertion reason questions are a must. And what I feel is they are able to diagnose the important misconceptions which the students are having. So while making questions, good distractors are also important. And besides the distractors, it is important to make the distractors in a manner so that we are able to diagnose the important misconceptions and clarify them. Next. Yeah. Now, in this case, we have to, like what I feel is in while teaching mathematics, we have to prepare our students for our 21st century skills. So here we can take case studies. Now, case studies should be relatable and real data should be taken. And besides the data, real data, innovative questions should be there. So now in this question, we have a graph which shows a population of fruit flies in a 50-day controlled environment. So it is a real life modeling problem. Using these activities, the students will get stimulated. So I think good case-based studies questions is a must, and teachers should devote a lot of time to make these activities, and they should connect it with the real situations. Next. Yeah. And now use of technology is a must in today's time. What I feel is teachers should adopt to the changes in the modern times. And after pandemic, most of the teachers are well equipped to use, like use of GeoGebra, use of Google. This all will help students as well as teachers to explain some concepts which are very abstract in nature. And next we have a group discussion, guided inquiry type questions, in which students will be able to learn from each other, and even the abstract concept of limit they can understand if they are working it in a group. Next slide. Yeah, this has already been discussed many times, like the Blooms, we all know. This order also is there. But what I feel is that whenever an item or assessment paper is made, most of the teachers are just writing the questions on the basis of the difficulty level or the number of steps which they involve. And later on, they try and, put it into some Bloom. So what is important is, while forming an item, very clearly the cognitive level should be kept in mind. And most questions are made according to the cognitive level, and the learning framework very clearly gives many questions on different cognitive levels and how to make them. Next. Now see, like different cognitive levels are there: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But like in generally what most of the teachers and the students, they are just solving the problems. And like evaluate is a higher order skill. Now sometimes evaluate is just used for solving a problem. It's just like calculate. So like if you have a problem of differentiation, and there are two factors, either you can use it directly using product rule, or you can just expand it and then differentiate, or you can find its equivalent logarithmic form and then differentiate. Will the answer be same or different? So that judgment the student should do. So what I am trying to explain is all these things are very well given in our document. But what is important is how to differentiate between each one of them. And if this framework is gone through properly, lot many doubts and things which are not clear to the teachers, those things will get cleared. Next. Next slide, please. I think there's one more slide. Yeah, this is my last slide. And see, one very important point which I want to mention here is, while making an item or while making some assessment questions, you have to see that what is the domain from which you are, what is the content which you are taking the item. First is worth being familiar with. Worth being familiar with, it's like the formulas or the values of some constants that you must know, because without them you will not be able to solve the problem. Second part, in the second circle, you will find important to know and do, like simple differentiation, integration. You must know. Once you remember the formulas, you must be able to solve and integrate or differentiate. Suppose I am taking the question of calculus, but the enduring understanding, that domain which is the most important, essential, is the inner code which you see. Here, what is important is, while forming a question, you have to see that you are striking at what the student should answer. So here, like in differentiation or integration, it is an optimizing technique. So if you are asking a problem, it should be to optimize, like rate of change or minimizing the cost or maximizing the revenue. And integration, very the student should be told that it is like to find out the volume. Later on, they will study how to find the volume using integration. So what is important is to see all these finer points of our subject. And the learning framework has been, there are different sections, and these points are being highlighted here, which will benefit the teachers who are the primary users, and through them the students. That's all for me today, and I am really helpful to EI team as well as Subhash sir and Hilal sir for the constant support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul ji. So with this, we come to the last part of today's webinar, submission of feedback by the principals and teachers on the draft learning framework. So I request Sudhir ji to please show that particular link through which we can submit the feedback. Google form for the feedback will be available just immediately after this session on the Cbse academic website, as you can see it here. So when you click on this particular link, there would be a Google form that would be right in front of you. So there are the details regarding to your email ID, your full name, your mobile number, designation, the school, affiliation of the school, and then region to which where the school is situated, and then state also. And then afterwards, there are a few questions regarding the draft learning framework, which the teachers and the principals need to submit their feedback upon. So coming down to that, so there is a section which is specifically which will specifically refer to the points where specific feedback is required from the principals and teachers, especially question number 12. Can we have this question number 12? So question number 12 would be about a particular subject, the page number or the feedback which a reader would like to give on that particular draft framework. Then how would they recommend this to the colleague to implement this framework in the classroom? And at the last part, last section, we have links to the framework, which for the convenience of the users who will be submitting this feedback. So right, just clicking at a particular link, you will be directed towards the document. For example, when we click on the English feedback, document. The document of English will be open, so the readers can have it at for their ready reference and submit their feedback on this. So this link will be live immediately after the webinar. I request the teachers as well as the principals to go through the document and submit their feedback, because this feedback will enable us to have any further modification before finalizing and releasing it in the coming few days. So 15 days time will be given for submission of the feedback to the Google link. So I request all of you to please go through this and submit your feedback. That would help us in enriching this document. Thank you about listening carefully about the feedback process. And to end this program, I would like to place on record thanks to the educational initiatives for helping us in creating this document. My thanks to Director Academics and my officers at Cbse Academic Unit, Cbse experts in various subjects who have been part of review as well as the content development for the learning frameworks. And my thanks also to the IT unit of Cbse for continuous supports regarding this launch of this webinar today. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for joining. Namaskar.